Hey guys, what's going on? Coda here. Today, I want to talk about the lore and story surrounding a race in Warhammer that's very near and dear to me, which are, of course, the High Elves. They were my first army in Warhammer Fantasy, the first miniatures I bought and painted when I was around 12 years old, and, you know, nostalgia train, all that. But I know a lot about the lore and background of the High Elves, and it seems to be maybe something people like to listen to. I can't really tell. So I'm just going to ramble about the stuff that I see when I open the 8th edition book here. Don't really know what's going to come, but, let's just relax and listen to some High Elf lore as we get hyped for Game 2. So let's see here. We have the province of Saphery. Saphery is an exceptionally magical and enchanted place. It's got skies that glimmer and glow in different hues of pink and blue, and rivers that flow in reverse, and lights that flicker in the clouds, and all that kind of really cool, magical, fun stuff. It's a place where the winds of magic are very active, and so this is where most of the High Elf mages and magic users come from. It's a place of knowledge and wisdom and learning, but also it's a place that studies the art of combat. In the heart of Saphery is the city known as Hoeth. It's a city of great relevance, and it'll no doubt be a part of the Total War experience. The centerpiece of Hoeth is this bone-white tower, where the greatest library of magical knowledge in the entire Warhammer world is, and it's called the Tower of Hoeth. It stretches endlessly into the clouds, and within its halls train both the LOREMASTERS and the SWORDMASTERS of Hoeth. SWORDMASTERS are one of our infantry choices in Total War 2. They are swordsmen without equal. They're like exemplary warriors with their two-handed greatswords. If you remember that scene at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, where the elven battle line perfectly swings their swords in sync with each other, that's these guys. They will very likely outclass every current greatsword unit in the game. Imagine the damage of the Wildwood Rangers with the armor like the greatswords, and I think that you're going to be pretty close to these guys. And a lot like the mages of the city, the Swordmasters are really artists who have perfected the art of killing. Their weapons are enchanted by the mages and smiths of Saphery, so their blades never dull no matter how many heads they cut off, right? And on the tabletop, these guys used to be able to deflect incoming arrows with their swords alone. And I know in the CA interview, they were kind of toying with that idea. It was actually very iconic for them, so I really do hope that they put it in. And if they need to lower their power in another way, they should do that. And then we have the LOREMASTERS. So some Swordmasters are so gifted that they go on to become these LOREMASTERs. These are that very unique hero-caster hybrid character in the unit roster, the one that they said was kind of had the power of a lord but was a hero. So these guys are very cool. They're the ones who know the basic spells from every lore of magic, and they're basically these guys that just want to learn everything. And since they're elves and they're crazy, they learn everything really, really well. So they train for eternity and they master and combine art and magic and war. And that's very rare, even for an elf, because usually the elves kind of choose a path and get obsessed over that and study it and things like that. So basically these guys are like that kid in school that was always really good at everything that they ever tried, but they're also kind of eclectic and weird in the lore. They're very kind of almost goofy or almost like a little crazy old man type of vibe. They're going to be very powerful though, because they're going to be extremely deadly melee combatants, and they're going to be potent magic users. So now we'll swing back on over to the western side of Eataine, and now we're in the mountainous province of Caledor. So Caledor is the land of the dragons, what few dragons remain in the High Elf existence. It was once a province that was alive with bursting active volcanoes and throngs of powerful dragons flying in the air. The first mage to ever tame a dragon was named Kaldor, and his name has lived on ever since in honor. At the peak of the High Elf power, hundreds of these dragons would fly into battle, ridden by the noble knights of the House of Caledor. They would crush all before them, obviously. But as time went on and things changed, the power of the elves waned, and so too did the rage of these dragons. So now, all these dragons basically sleep. You know, they sleep below the cold granite mountains, and Kaldor's kind of cooled off into this cold, mountainous, ominous range. And these dragons are only woken by the most powerful and respected High Elf lords and mages in the greatest times of need. But the noble dragon princes of Kaldor are still quite real. They just don't have their dragons, unfortunately. But this is where the Kaldor dragon princes in the game hail from. They're the heavy cav option that we're going to get in game 2. They are like powerful and skilled beyond measure, but they're also arrogant and proud beyond pretty much all reason. Far more arrogant than any elf, which is saying a lot. In fact, in the lore, they won't even bow their banner to the Phoenix King, and they remain the only regiment to not do so. They also rarely follow orders in the High Elf army. Like, according to the lore, they don't listen to the High Elf commanders, they just do their own thing. But they're never really questioned because it's kind of known to everyone that once they enter the battle, they go after the biggest, toughest, most dangerous foe that they can find, and they usually best it. What's kind of cool about these guys is that in the thick of battle, their true nature shows, and they kind of become less of a dick, right? So their arrogance kind of turns into courage, their aloofness turns into determination, and they become selfless and skilled, and they're ready to sacrifice themselves for the High Elves. They kind of become like this heart of gold type of guy, but then after the battle is over, they turn back into this asshole. So kind of actually a unique story, a unique little arc for Warhammer at least. They're going to be very, very powerful units. But back to Kaldor. Kaldor is also the home to something called VAULS Anvil, which is a volcano where the Shrine of Vaul lies in a great tower of like adamant and granite. It's the greatest forge in all of Ulthuan. The smiths of Vaul engineer and forge the most insane weapons, both magical and physical, for use for the elven lords and commanders and nobles. And these guys are pretty hardcore. The priests of Vaul, these forge guys, they actually blind themselves with like hot fiery runes. So they become more, because Vaul was blind, the elven god Vaul was blind. And so just like Vaul, they blind themselves to become more in tune with the power of their forge god, and thus they're able to harness some of the winds of magic, and that's how they have so much magic in their weapons. Eataine is the southernmost province of Ulthuan here. It holds the one and only naval passageway into the High Elf realm. It's right here at the bottom where the horseshoe opens, and most importantly, it's where one of the most relevant and important cities in the entire continent is, and that is the port city of Lothern. Lothern is this bustling merchant hub where vessels from all over the world dock and trade. It's the one place in Ulthuan that races of all kinds can be found. Well, at least up until a certain point. Throughout the Straits of Lothern are these colossal glittering walls, just covered in precious jewels like rubies and emeralds and diamonds. They're like titanic bastions. And the third gate, the third one of these bastions, is made completely out of gold. And that's the official point where all the fun stops. That's the point where only High Elves are allowed. And no foreigners, no merchants, no traders can go past. The entire area, this entire Lothern area, is on constant vigilant watch from a military presence, and that military presence is the Logan Sea Guard. Those are one of the units that, well, technically more than one of the units that we'll be using in Total War II. The Logan Sea Guard are like the Swiss Army knife of the High Elves. They are the missile units that also have the spears, if you can recall from the roster reveal. The Sea Guard in the lore are like these very flexible warriors who battle on the decks of warships just as often as they man the walls in a siege or battle on land. And that's why they have so many weapon options. They're supposed to be this very flexible, elite force. And that's also why they're the crew of the Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers. The Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers are the single artillery piece that we're getting in Total War II. Those are mostly used in the lore on the broadsides of their warships. The High Elves have a very, very strong navy. Actually, both elves do, as we'll soon find out. But yeah, the bolt throwers mainly used on warships, but the High Elves have then adapted it to use in all types of battles, and it's kind of was mass produced from that point forward. So yeah, the Sea Guard are your jacks of all trades. They're bow, spear, shields, sea, land, boat, artillery. They're very good at a lot of things. And they're even the ones who fly on top of the skyborne chariots. Those are called the Sky Cutter Chariots. And unfortunately, it's a unit that we're not going to get right off the bat in Total War 2, but we could see it later on. It's a flying chariot. It's pulled by giant hawks, and the Sea Guard ride on top of it with bolt throwers, and it's pretty cool. So I'd imagine it's going to be pretty hard to implement, but I think when they do get it, it's going to be super cool.
So let's see. While we're talking about elite units, let's move up here to the Shrine of ASURYAN. It's not a province, but it's the relevant location for the Phoenix Guard. And guys, the Phoenix Guard are really badass. I don't think people quite understand it yet. These guys are the chosen of Azarian, who's the creator god of the elves, and they're imbued so intensely by him that they give off a literally godly glow wherever they go. And these are elves that literally cause fear, as in they have the fear special rule. They train somewhere called the Chamber of Days. It's this bastion or fortress where the literal future of the world is etched upon the walls in like runes of fire. So these guys are kind of like the keepers of time itself. Because of this, each Phoenix Guard knows the future to some extent, and like most notably, they know exactly when they're gonna die. So that's pretty brutal. They do not speak whatsoever. Like, they're completely silent, not in battle, in society. They don't speak to elves, not to each other, no screams or charges. They're just always silent. And that's can be pretty eerie as well. They are pretty much unbreakable and mostly immune to psychology, let alone any emotion whatsoever. But I mean, these guys are so badass that they literally had the fear special rule in the tabletop, and they're just normal human-sized elves. So that's like the same rule that Gorbals and Minotaurs have. So that's pretty insane. And that's just what being around these guys does, because their eyes blaze with a fiery intensity of unshakable faith, and the air around them literally gets heavy with the raw power of time. So yeah, the Phoenix Guard are gonna be really badass. They should be able to go toe-to-toe with pretty much anything in the game. I guess we'll see how they actually turn out. But I think that that's gonna be it for now, and I'll stop here. I'm sure I'll pick up on the rest of the provinces or units soon. If there's interest, I'm not really sure. I'm still kind of feeling this whole thing out. But anyways guys, until next time, this is Coda. Thanks for listening, and take care.